Hey, and that little, wait, that's not a stubby. Those buttons aren't tight either. It's not a stubby? No. And I'm not going to show it to you yet. If you really want to see it, you got to wait till the end. I'm giving you a little preamble, a little opening here, just to give you a heads up. This is a long video. No way around it. And this is just to preface my technique that I use. And I know a lot of you guys have been asking for it, which is why I want to do this, but the reality is I probably put in more effort than necessary. This whole process for me took about 3 hours, 3.5 hours of hand polishing, which is a lot of work. My hands are pretty, I don't want to say sore, but they're smooth, they're worn down, they've had a rough day. The reality is you probably can do half the steps, and you can even just use the basically the last step I use with the flits at the end. You can probably just use that, and you do that a couple times and you'll have probably 85% of the results that I have. I'm just kind of someone who likes to get in there and gets it done and have fun doing it that way. So I wanted to put that out there. So yeah, so enjoy the show, and if you just want to see what it looks like, skip to the end. I think it's the last 2 minutes or so we look at it. So, all right, without any further ado, let's get on with the show. Hello there, internet. If you notice, we got rid of the fun backdrop, so that can only mean one thing. It's time to go to work. And yes, we will be doing some work today because we're gonna be polishing up the Stubby. Time to polish the Stubby, y'all. So, like I mentioned in my Stubby review video, I got this, or first look video, not really a full review, which I'm loving more and more over time. So that'll be coming in sneak peek. It had a few minor little scratches and stuff like that in it, but I got it knowing that because I planned on polishing it up. So we're going to polish this guy up, and I kind of want to show you maybe just on 1/2 or 1/4, and then we'll cut to the next so you can kind of see what we can do. So I'm starting with 400 grit. This is maybe the first tip, I often don't know where to start. A lot of times I want to start with something like 220 as opposed to 440. Or as opposed to 400, but we just got the sandpaper wet. And then depending on if I'm starting to get the results I'm looking for, I might switch to a lower grit, but this is in pretty good shape, all things considered. So all we're gonna do is we're just gonna start sanding in one direction mostly. I say one direction a lot in my videos because I know I always make the reference that they're a terrible band. So, but what we're gonna do is we're just gonna sand. And what we're looking for is an even scratch pattern. So as you can see here, right, I've got all these scratches going this way. Almost said that again. And we just want to basically get that across the whole surface so that we don't see any of the previous scratches or machine marks. So it'll be a little more obvious when we switch to our next step, if this is where we want it. So, all right, we're just going to do that around the outside. Keep everything wet. As long as everything's wet, your scratches will be finer. It's a nice little lubrication in there, the water. So, especially as you get to the higher grits, that's when it really matters to try and keep it moist. Who likes that word? All right, so the other reason you want to do it in the same direction, see what I did there, is when we go to the next step. So we'll get there in a second. So I think I need to do a little bit more in the flats, and then, essentially this part would be done. But I'm going to, let's see if there's another spot where there's a scratch I was trying to remove, just to kind of show you. So essentially what you're doing when you're sanding down and getting rid of scratches is you're not actually really getting rid of scratches, you're getting rid of everything else that isn't a scratch, and then everything becomes even again. So, yeah, so this right here, see that? Right by my thumb? That's like a little scratch or something. So we're gonna hit this up for a second because this is probably a better spot to show you. And we're shaking the old kerosene lamp on my desk. If you don't believe me, maybe I'll show it. It's hard because it's still wet, so I'm getting little fingerprints, or not fingerprints, little watermarks on there. But let's see. And I don't think I see it, right? That means essentially we've scratched through it and we removed all the material to get that now even. So scratches aren't really deep, most of them, on material like this. Here's another example here by my thumb. See that? So basically, once we've sanded down to the point where we're not seeing the scratch anymore, we're just seeing the scratches from the sandpaper, that's when we can move on to the next step. But you got to get it all even before you go to the next step. So right here will be another good example. where you can see those little vertical lines from the machining. So as I do this, see how we can still see those vertical lines in there? So once those are gone, then I know I've sanded it down enough so that we're all smooth. So these are probably a little deeper because they're machining marks. So this is where you actually might want 220 or even 200 or something like that, or even higher. Because the higher the grit, so the higher the number, the finer the sand, and the less you're removing when you sand it. So in theory, I could sand this down totally smooth with 7,000 grit the whole way, but I would literally be here for days and days and days and days and days because you're removing such little material. It wouldn't be worth it, obviously. That's why you do it in different grits, in different stages. So you can use the higher grits to really get everything even, and then, or sorry, the lower grits, I guess, and then the higher grits to, to put that mirror finish on. So we're going to pause it, and then I'll come back at the next step to show you how we know when we're ready to go to the next step after the first step. So the first step is just removing all the scratches and seeing just the sandpaper scratches. So we'll be back in a sec. So here's what always happens, everybody. I always think I can start higher than I actually can. So I was starting with 400 grit, but what you're going to notice is, especially like right here, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pick it up on camera, but yeah, you see how you can kind of see those little curved lines going with it from where it was machined. If I don't get rid of those, I'm not really going to get that mirror finish that I'm after. It'll still be nice and shiny, it'll still be smooth, but if I'm really trying to get rid of that, I really need to go to a higher grit. There was one corner that was really showing them. I think it might be this one. Yeah, see right there? See those lines? I really need to get to a higher grit or I'll just be here all day. So I'm going to go to 180. Now this 180 that I have doesn't really work as a wet sandpaper. The glue kind of gives up, so it's not really meant for wet sanding. So we're just going to hit this up. Oh, and I had that a little out of frame for you guys, sorry. But it's doing a little bit more work in there, but we still see those lines, right? So realistically, I gotta sand those down and get rid of those if I'm gonna get the results I want. So we're gonna sand those down until the point where we get scratches, so I'll come back and show you that. All right, sweet. All right, we are back. So I just finished the 400 step. And yeah, we got some scratches going in different directions because I've been kind of all over the place sanding this, but really trying to make sure I got all the scratches from the previous step out before I went in there. One thing I'd like to say at this point, while I get my 600 grit sandpaper ready, it still wants to soak a little bit. As it gets a little wetter, it's a little more malleable, so it's still a little stiff. But I just put it in there. It's a really good idea to have a plan of attack when you go to sand this. And what I mean by that is, if I'm sanding this spot, I probably shouldn't just move right to this corner and then go around this side and then just because you're twisting it, trying to get sanding at different angles, really focus on getting all of a certain area because each step isn't a huge difference in the amount of work you're doing. So the difference between 400 to 600 grit and the scratches, I'm probably not going to be able to see the difference. You can actually see some scratches I might have missed. We'll see if they come out in the next steps. But if I start sanding this, I probably should do this and then flip it over and then do these two before I move to any other facets or sides or angles. If I'm doing this curve, I probably should then do this curve so I don't forget what I'm doing. And then when I do this side, I probably should do this one and this one, and then flip it over and do this and this. So just so I don't lose what I'm getting at. So here, we're gonna look at this side. Let's take a look at some of the scratches here. See what we're working with. Get it wet. So since the scratches are going left to right, I'm gonna try and put them up and down for a minute. Whoops. See that? Now I find when you're doing areas and faces like this with curves, the thing that you always miss is those edges, like kind of where the transition, see how the sanding just really doesn't get in there quite as well as it does in the smooth part? So that's what we're doing. But so we really want to try to focus the pressure of our finger into those areas so that we get all those previous scratches out and we get everything nice and shiny. Well, you really hear that rattling. All right, rinse it off. So we can still see some side-to-side scratches in there. See that? So I haven't done any side-to-side scratches. I've only done up and down for the most part. So when I see those in there, I know they're still there from the previous step. So we got that one long one right there. Let's roll this sandpaper around a little bit. I find these lower grit sandpapers too, like the 400s, the 600s, they wear out much faster. As you get higher and higher, the sandpaper seems to last longer, meaning I could even, like, once I use it, reuse it again, like let it dry out and reuse it with some of those higher grits. So that one's still in there, looks pretty deep. So that's probably a good example of one that may be there till the end without going back and then really redoing all those previous steps to really, go back to the 320 and try and take it out, and then 400. And that's where the work of the mirror finish comes in, and that's where doing it by hand is a lot more work, a lot more effort than trying to do it with the machine. So, doing these early steps with the Dremel may be a better idea, but you can see it's still there, but we're getting closer to it. Some of the other ones aren't there. So we'll hit it up a little bit more, and then we'll come back after the 600 step. But again, that's all we're doing. We're just doing each step till we see, we don't really see any of the scratches from the previous step. Sweet. All right, we are into our next step. We're moving on to 800 grit. So again, it's starting to get a little shinier, starting to get a little more satiny as our scratches get finer and finer. So I think there's a couple spots where you can see some very slight, some of those machining marks that made it through. So let's see if I can find that same one. Now when I finished the 600, I kind of went back and did horizontal scratches as opposed to vertical scratches. Just as I was kind of going through checking for previous scratches from the previous step. So, but in any event, let's hit it with the 800. So we're going to hit the same spot right here. So since my scratches are again going side to side, I'm going to scratch essentially up and down, up and down, up and down. Now each step is probably taking me about another, 15 minutes. You're not seeing off camera, just to give you an idea of how long it's taking. It is a lot of work to do it by hand. I'm looking into some steps that, some tools that maybe with a Dremel, some finer Dremel bits, very specific ones for polishing, doing curves and odd shapes like this that may work. Because it is a lot of work to do by hand. But so as you can see, most of the horizontal scratches are gone. Some other ones in there, and again, those are probably going to be, at the end of the day, micro scratches that I'm not going to get out. So that's not too shabby. So you can see also right in the edge right here, see by my thumb, some of those little horizontal scratches. So I got to focus on that spot right there. We can see some of those are gone. So yeah, we're just going to essentially do that. I'm going to tackle this, then this, then this, then this, then the sides, then these edges around the sides, and then these flats, and then these sides, and then we'll move on to 800 grit. And I don't know which side I just was working on. See, you start turning it around, you don't even realize where you were working. So I think this is where we were working, but now I'm not sure. So I might just do it all over again off camera. Sweet, see you in a minute. Okay, y'all, 800 done, more or less. You're starting to, 800 is where you start realizing, one, all the mistakes you made, but two, what it's going to start looking like once it gets shiny. So we're going to start seeing more and more of the little scratches that I've missed, and they're going to be all over the place, but it's going to feel smooth and it's going to look good. So let's move on to the 1000 grit. So 1500 to 1500 to 2000 is where you really start seeing the real shine, but 800 is where, for me anyway, I start seeing what I'm working with. So we're just gonna hit it up with 1000. And these steps are probably looking pretty repetitive because they are, so hopefully it's not too boring. Another thing I find, as my sandpaper starts to wear out a little, it seems to start getting a little finer and smoother, and so it almost looks like sometimes when I go on to that next step, I'm making it worse. But those scratches are finer and will help with the next step. So in this case, I'm going back and forth quite a bit because I've found that with the shape of this, I'm learning as I go with this particular, with each piece, the way these kind of curve up, I really need to hit it at a side angle to get some of these sections sanded down. So most of the horizontal scratches are gone. There are definitely still some in there, so we're going to keep at it for a minute, but some of the horizontals are from this 1000 grit as well. Each step seems to go, not faster and faster, but those first couple steps for me take almost an hour, and then each step after that is usually 15-20 minutes, I find, on average, because you're really just doing the follow-up work. So all right. So it's starting to come along, and again, you can see on those edges some of the scratches that are kind of deeper and not matching the other pattern and the size. As you get further and further, you'll notice the scratches are finer, and you'll be able to see where you've got those bigger, thicker scratches. So, but it is what it is. So we're just going to do the same thing with 1,000 grit now, and I'll come back. All right, guys. So this is after 1,000 grit. I feel like these are just getting kind of repetitive because I don't have a whole lot of other stuff to say other than, well, let's do that again. But a couple things I did want to point out at this step. As you're sanding in different directions, the way the light reflects it really makes it look maybe worse than it is, right? At this stage with these scratches going this way and this going this way, the light's reflecting really makes it look like it's probably in worse shape than it is. As the grits get higher and higher, we get closer to getting rid of that, those marks, because all of those scratches are from the previous step, and those we're just going to be completely getting rid of. So we're slowly starting to get there. So we're going to hit it up with the, wasn't I just doing 1,000? Yeah, I was doing 1,000, so we're on 1,200. So we're just going to tear a piece of 1,200 off, put it in here. And one thing I kind of wanted to say about what I like about hand polishing it, one, it's a lot more work. My fingers are starting to prune up a little bit than it would be doing it with a machine, but there's some satisfaction in kind of doing it by hand and knowing that you did it that way. And two, you really maintain the original shape. Because you're not removing that much material, you really have to work hard to remove anything. You really keep close to that same shape. So when you start hitting it up with machines, even Dremels and stuff like that, you can start to lose, it's very subtle, but you start to lose some of that. So it goes from taking something and really kind of changes it quite a bit when you do it with a machine, where a hand finish just kind of gives it that handmade kind of feel, but really maintains what it originally was. So that's part of the reason I like doing it by hand, more or less. So this paper towel is getting wrecked, so we'll throw a new one in. At these stages, I kind of like doing it on a paper towel as well, because little bits of the sandpaper come off, and then they can kind of leave little scratches. If you're really trying to do this, perfect, the more ways you can avoid, any little bits of the sandpaper that wore off. If I'm doing it on the table, this kind of helps. So we're just going to go in there. We're going to do it again. Same old, same old. So we're at 1,200 grit. We're going to do it to the side, because I found as I'm doing this and I'm learning from the piece that I'm working on, the scratches along the rim here are easier to get on the side, or with sideways scratches, sideways pattern. If I turn it this way, I find as I'm pushing into the corners, I'm more successful than pulling against it. So I'm turning it so I can get this corner with a push. And then we're gonna do some more vertical again, just to kind of check my scratch pattern. The kerosene lamp, I probably should move it, huh? So again, it almost looks worse than where we were before, because the sandpaper is still fresh, but those scratches, just the grit that's on here, it can't scratch really much deeper. So as I finish it up, we'll get there. So pretty happy with how it's coming out. So, all right, see you after the next step. All right, if you're an eagle-eye viewer, you might notice the camera angle changed a little. Not sure how much, but I had to kind of stop for a bit. I had to take care of family stuff, but we're back. And I actually skipped a step as well. I skipped showing you kind of the 1,500, so I finished the 1,200 and then finished the 1,500, because really, honestly, the 1,200 you can probably skip, but the 2,000 for me really starts seeing things come out. So we can see it's looking, if you get it in the right light, you can see that mirror starting to really show up, but we still have a lot of those little, again, those little scratches, and that's what these next little steps are going to work on taking out. So I should have got my 2,000 ready. So here we go. Come on, 2,000. So we'll take a piece of 2,000. In the water she goes. And the difference, I don't think I've really mentioned this, but when you're getting sandpaper, and you're using wet sand, you do want to make sure that if you're getting it wet, it's made for being wet. Otherwise, basically, usually what happens is the glue that's holding the sandpaper or the grit to the sandpaper just starts to come off, and you're left with a gluey, sticky mess. So, just so you know, if it's not made for getting wet, don't use it. But most of the higher grits, pretty much anything, boy, I'd say at least 600 and up, and probably 400 and up in most cases are going to be designed to be wet sanding, because those are finer grits made for polishing, and you really want the wetness to help get rid of the scratches and keep it fine. So. So we're gonna work on this little corner right here. And the finer the grit sandpaper, I find the softer and more cloth-like it is as it gets wet, so you can really kind of really get in there, and it just feels real smooth. It feels real nice polishing it up. So once you get to those higher grits, this is probably my favorite step. Oh shit. Oops, I didn't mean to swear. Let's zoom in a little. I had that off camera. But we really can start seeing, now the other thing too with these finer grits is you're able to start really seeing the difference between the previous step and the one you're working on, so it gets a little easier to get all the scratches from before when you're doing it with the 400 grit and 600 grit and 800 grit. Even the scratch patterns, there's so many scratches, it's really hard to see what you may or may not have missed, but as you get to these higher grit steps, it's a little easier to see if you miss something. So, all right. So you can see a little difference there. So we switch the light and get a little different reflection. So again, still looks pretty scratchy, but it's starting to get smoother. You're starting to see the water kind of bead up on the surface. See that? Right there by my thumb. So we're getting there. So I'll see you after 2000. Okay, so this is after 2000 grit. I'm going to keep the camera in a little closer so maybe we can see what I'm doing. Probably should have been doing this all along this way. So sorry, but I'm not going to re-record the whole thing because I can't. And I'm not going to undo it all. So hopefully it's not too bad. So we got 3000 grit going. We just finished 2000 grit. So it's really starting to get the shine now, right? And just for giggles, I'm going to show you this. Because this guy right here, with some of this mirroring that I got, again, you can see some of the finer scratches in there, and it's got fingerprints. It's not super clean, but this one I just took to 2000 grit, and then I did the flitz polishing step. We'll see at the end. So just so you know, you probably can stop here if you really wanted to, and with the flitz metal polish, take it up, because this is a pretty decent grit to stop at, and you can't really feel, you're not really going to feel much of a difference with any of these further steps. It's just trying to get it closer to that real true mirror. So let's get in there and get her done. So 3000 grit. So what I'm looking for, see these little scratches that are going side to side? We're really trying to get rid of those. And as I get rid of those, we're just basically doing that over the entire body. And as I get rid of everything, then I know I'm ready to move on to the next step. So 3000 grit. We're getting there. We're getting close, folks. The end is in sight. It's been a much faster journey for you than it is for me, even though it's probably a long journey for you as well, huh? All right, and then these flat surfaces, same thing. See all these little linear scratches? We're almost gonna, it almost feels like erasing at this point, because you can really start to see those previous scratches go away. And when you really get in the right angle, when you're looking at it and you're sanding it, you can see those scratches disappear as you go. So that's where we're at. So we're gonna finish up 3000 grit, and I'll be back. All right, everybody, 3000 grit, we're doing good. On to 4000. So we'll just get in there and do it so you can see what we're doing. So it's getting, especially once it gets wet, it's getting a little harder and harder to see scratches, but it's also getting easier and easier to see what I've left behind and what I've smoothed out. So hopefully this can pick it up a little bit so you can see what we're doing. But it's really just getting to be, see, as you reflect the light on it, you can see where the scratches are. So you just kind of have to do that back and forth. And we just get in there and get her done. So, a little elbow grease. Aim working those corners right there. Those scratches are a little more resistant. So right up until the edge, once it hits the rounded edge, those I never have problems with. Those always look really good, but it's little spots like right into the edge where you see right there by my index finger. Those little bit of scratches. So that's kind of where you need to focus your efforts a little more. Really put it in there. All right, and we're just going to do that all the way around. See you in a minute. All right, 5000 grit time, y'all. 5000 grit. 5000. All the stuff that's getting on my fingernails. Gross. It'll wash off, except for the stuff that gets in your nails. That stays there for a while with the camera's awfully close. So here we go. So we'll get this in there. And these steps really feel like polishing. Feels really smooth and starts looking real good. So we're up close, we're under some highlight so we can really see the scratches that we're putting in. But let me tell you, this is starting to get real close to that mirror that we're looking for. So Get it up on the flats, and again, it almost feels like, you know, we're looking for little scratches. Hit it, hit it, hit it until they disappear. And we're just doing that over and over. So we will come back after 4,000 grit. All right, y'all. I almost was going to skip this, but we've come so far. And skip just showing you. I was just going to jump in and do the 7,000. But here we are after 5,000. So we're getting pretty close. Pretty close. And at this point, again, you can see the scratches that are still going to be there, but you also can see how we're getting that mirror finish. If we do this just right, you can see my Dr. Pepper t-shirt. So we're getting that mirror that we're after. And she feels smooth, y'all. She feels smooth. We like that. So the 7,000 barely leaves any scratches. But when you're playing within the light, you can see I've got scratches that way. And I don't really this way. And then I switch it. And I can see I've got some scratches that way. So the light plays a big part in this. You really need a good light to be able to see what's there and what you're taking off. So get it nice and high on the ridge. Focus on those corners. Really get it in there. All right, y'all, we're gonna come up and finish the rest. All right, folks, so here we are after 7,000 grit. Looking pretty good. So you can see the scratches in there still. And let me tell you, the camera's picking it up a lot more than you see them under this bright light. So it looks a lot better in person. But still looking pretty sharp. So what we're gonna do though is we're gonna use the flits. Get this out of the way. And the Dremel. Because I found this works really, really well. So we're just gonna take this, we're gonna apply it pretty lightly. You don't need a lot of this stuff, but we want to be able to get, we're just going to do half the spinner at once. And you'll be able to see some of the magic of the flits. So we're just going to take this. And so it doesn't go splattering everywhere, I'm just going to kind of rub it in a little bit. So it's just a Dremel with one of those little pads that are probably in your little Dremel kit that you've never used. Now you've got a use for them. We're just going to rub this all in. Try and get a nice even coating. Try and get it on the pad to absorb some of the excess, otherwise it goes flying everywhere. Just rubbing it in, rubbing it in. Wasn't paying attention to the camera there for a minute. Hopefully it stayed in frame. I think it did. All right. Now watch that pad turn black. As we remove just a little bit. Just a little bit. So I'm running my Dremel at the lowest setting, 5,000. So you should be able to hear me still. And we're running it pretty light. Just getting it on all the sides, and it's spitting it up into my face. That's lovely. That's lovely. So we're just going to do half at a time. Got to be careful with the Dremel. I think I just nicked it a little bit where this hits the spinner body. The Dremel, you know, when this is spinning, it definitely wants to pull. So you got to be careful that when this pad catches some of the corners, it doesn't just like pull it like that. You want to watch out for that sort of thing. So you want to hold it firm. There we go. Get all the surfaces, especially the flat surfaces. The flat surfaces are like the hardest to polish by hand. So really trying to get in there with the Dremel, with the flits on these flat surfaces. And then we'll take our flits cloth. Just rub that stuff off. Oops. Look at that. Look at that, would you? So obviously this is going to be a long one. I can tell this is going to be a super long one. It's probably going on 30 minutes at least. I don't think there's much I can cut out. It just is what it is. Just is what it is. So if you stuck around, good. You guys asked for the polishing video, so you're getting the polishing video. So looking pretty sharp. Looking pretty good. We're gonna do that on the other half. And then we're gonna wipe it down, and then we'll bring it in for grand finale. See you in a sec. All right, guys, you ready to see it? You ready? You sure you are? There we have it. Now it looks good. Now I want to show you something. Oh, there's my shirt. So I've been working under a bright light so that I can see all the scratches, but this is probably closer to what it really looks like. Whoa, see the difference some really bright light makes on it? Look at that, it looks like water. So now do you believe me? How it looks in person. So with the Dremel pad, you can get a little bit of marks with the flitz. I probably will do a hand flitzing. I don't know if that's the right words to use, a hand flitzing on this after, but there we go. Pretty snazzy looking. So I got to put a bearing back in this guy, and we'll be good to go. So the bearing takes a little while to cure, but I thought you guys ought to see what it looks like, a little closer to what it looks like in person under some more or less normal light. So there you have it. Polish your stubby, y'all. Polish it. All right. Till next time. Bye-bye, Internet. Kisses.